Silence is a source of great strength. Have you ever noticed how some people just don't say much? They're not rude. They're not shy, they just prefer silence. While others can fill a room with their voice, they sit quietly, observing, thinking, and maybe even smiling to themselves. Have you ever wondered what's really going on in their minds? What kind of people choose to say less in a world that never stops talking? They're the people you might call mysterious, or maybe even intimidating just because you can't quite figure them out. But the truth is silence has a story. It's not emptiness, it's depth. And sometimes that depth can feel a little bit uncomfortable to people who aren't used to it. Because silence exposes things, it makes space for truth, and not everyone can handle that. I remember being younger and sitting in group settings where everyone was talking over each other. I'd have something to say, something meaningful, but I'd hesitate. My brain would say, "Don't say it, it's not that important." And the conversation would move on. Later that night, I'd replay it in my head, wishing I had spoken up. It took me years to realize that silence isn't weakness, it's a different kind of strength. It's control. So what's the psychology behind people who don't talk too much? Why do some people just prefer to listen rather than speak? Well, here's something you should know: silence doesn't always mean something's wrong. Sometimes it means everything's right. Quiet people often have rich inner worlds. They think deeply about things most people just brush off. They notice details, the tone in someone's voice, the way someone avoids eye contact, the pause before a lie. Their mind is constantly processing, analyzing, understanding. That's why they speak less, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're careful about what they say. When a quiet person finally decides to speak, it usually carries weight. It's not empty noise, it's intentional. Think about it: the people who always talk, who never leave a second of silence, often talk to fill space. But the quiet ones, they let the space breathe. They're comfortable in it. That's power. Now here's a question. Have you ever mistaken someone's silence for weakness? It's easy to assume that if someone isn't loud or expressive, they're shy, insecure, or maybe even unfriendly. But that's not always true. Many quiet people are confident, just quietly confident. They don't need validation through constant talking or attention. Their validation comes from within. You see, in psychology, there's a concept called introversion. But being quiet doesn't automatically make you an introvert. Some people are just emotionally mature enough to know that not every thought deserves to be spoken. They value peace over chaos, calm over drama, and real connections over meaningless chatter. They've realized that listening is underrated. Most people listen to reply, but quiet people, they listen to understand. They notice things others miss, and that's why they often give the best advice when they finally do speak. You've probably had a friend like that. They hardly say a word, but when they finally do, you're like, wow, that hit deep. Let's be real, the world can be loud. Social media, group chats, people constantly talking about what they're doing, where they're going, who they're with. It's noise overload. In all that chaos, being someone who's calm, quiet, and grounded, that's rare. It's peaceful. It's almost sacred. And you know what's funny? Quiet people often make others uncomfortable just by existing. Because silence makes people face themselves. When you sit with someone who doesn't fill the air with constant talking, you're suddenly aware of your own thoughts. That's why some people can't stand silence, it forces them to look inward. But quiet people live there. They've made peace with their own thoughts. They don't run from their minds. They explore them. They understand themselves better than most. And that's why they don't need to broadcast every emotion. Think about it, the loudest person in the room isn't always the most confident one. Sometimes the loudness is a mask, a distraction from insecurity, but the one sitting quietly, that's usually someone who doesn't feel the need to prove anything. They already know who they are. Now let's take a moment. Are you one of those people who doesn't need to talk too much, or maybe you know someone who is? Maybe people have told you you're too quiet or you should talk more, and maybe at times you felt like you needed to change to fit in. But let me tell you something you don't. You don't have to be loud to be seen. You don't have to talk all the time to matter. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone who can't handle your silence. Because the truth is, silence has its own language. And the people who can't hear it, they're just not tuned in. There's a quote that says, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." It's a bit harsh, but real talk, it's true. Quiet people understand that every word carries energy. They choose their words carefully because they know words can heal or harm. Psychologically, quiet people are often more introspective. Their brains are wired to process experiences more deeply. That's why small talk feels draining to them at surface level. They'd rather talk about something meaningful, something real. You start a conversation about purpose, life, pain, growth, boom, they light up. But gossip or fake small talk, they check out. Here's another thing. Quiet people aren't necessarily loners. They just have a smaller circle. They don't need a crowd. They need connection. They'd rather have one deep, genuine conversation than 10 shallow ones. Quality over quantity, that's their way. And you know what's really beautiful? Quiet people often carry peace wherever they go. They don't bring unnecessary drama. They don't fight to be heard. Their presence itself can calm a room. That's because their energy speaks louder than words ever could. There's something powerful about stillness. In silence, you hear yourself. You find clarity. You realize who's real around you. You figure out what you actually want, not what the world tells you to want. That's why people who don't talk too much often grow into strong, stable, and self-aware individuals. They think before they act. They don't let emotions control them, they process, then respond. So, if you read someone who doesn't talk a lot, don't feel pressured to change. There's nothing wrong with being quiet. There's beauty in that. Your silence doesn't make you less interesting, it makes you magnetic. It draws people in because mystery attracts curiosity. But here's a challenge for you, don't let your silence become isolation. There's a difference between being peaceful and being disconnected. The world still needs your voice. Even if you don't speak often, when you do let it matter. Use it to inspire, to comfort, to build. You don't have to talk more, just talk meaningfully. Maybe you're the kind of person who observes everything but rarely shares what you see. Maybe you've got thoughts that could help someone. Ideas that could change lives, stories that could inspire others, but you keep them locked inside. Time to share what's inside you. The world needs quiet thinkers who speak up when it matters. So when someone says you're too quiet, just smile. They don't know the wisdom you hold. You're not empty, you're full. Full of awareness, empathy, and understanding. You just choose peace over noise, and that's something the world could use more of. Let your silence be strength, not shame. And when you do decide to speak, let it echo. If this message spoke to you, if you felt that spark of recognition in your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Because there are millions of people out there who feel misunderstood just because they're quiet. Let them know it's okay to be this way. Hey, if you're on YouTube, drop a comment. Are you one of the quiet ones or know someone who is? I'd love to hear your story because silence doesn't mean you lack a voice. So, until next time, stay true and grounded. Remember, not everyone who talks is wise, and silence doesn't mean weakness. Some of the strongest souls walk quietly among us.